Hey everyone, welcome back to Wentworth Live and welcome to the next Prisoner review. Now, in this video, I'm going to be reviewing Prisoner Cell Block H episode 12, Over the Fence. Now, in my last video, we were left on a big cliffhanger where Frankie was on the edge of the roof getting ready to end it all. So when this episode begins, Karen runs up the flights of stairs and she ends up on the roof herself, and she ends up walking over to Frankie really slowly, and it's quite an intense scene, especially during your first ever watch, because I honestly thought that Frankie was going straight over that edge. Karen ends up talking to Frankie and trying to find out what's going on. The women and the officers, they're on the prison grounds watching up and seeing everything that's unfolding in front of them. Karen then decides to try and show some tough love to Frankie, and this results in Frankie breaking down and crying, and Karen ends up hugging and comforting her, and Frankie just lets it all out, saying that her brother was doing it all for her, and then calls herself a dumb ox who can't even read. Oh, it breaks my heart. Luckily, Karen manages to talk Frankie down, and Frankie is then taken to solitary for her own safety, much to Karen's horror, because the officers, they're quite rough with Frankie in this scene. I was really over the moon that Frankie didn't jump off the roof, because despite her being like, a bit of a baddie against B and some of the other main characters, there's just something about Frankie that I absolutely love. Despite her bitchy one-liners and her bullying in some past episodes, there is this other side to Frankie that we've been witnessing since around episode 6 when Frankie's brother first arrived on the scene, and I think that's why Frankie has become a fan favourite. Dr. Miller persuades Karen to teach Frankie to read, which I thought was really nice. I mean, the scenes between Karen and Frankie in the rec room when, she's teaching her to read are really lush, and it kind of reminded me of the scenes between Erica and Frankie in the Wentworth version. Things did seem to be going well with the reading lessons, but then Frankie starts to fall more and more in love with Karen, and Frankie then goes to kiss her, but Karen's immediate reaction is to smack Frankie in the face, which does not go down well. It pisses Frankie off, ending the reading classes full stop. I mean, it's such a shame that Frankie and Karen's friendship ended this way. I honestly thought we were going to see a good friendship between these two. After all of this, Frankie then decides that she wants to escape Wentworth once and for all. And Doreen and Lizzie, they decide that they are going to go with her. Once again, it's all very sudden, and I'll be honest with you, when Frankie did decide that she wanted to just leave the prison, it does lead us on to, Prisoner's first ever successful escape. I mean, Lizzie, Doreen and Frankie, they all run out into the garden with a ladder. No idea how they got that ladder past reception, but once again, I'm happy to roll with it. Frankie then ends up cutting the barbed wire, and then all three of them jump the fence and they just make a run for it. Mum is in the garden watching the whole thing happening in front of her, and it was looking like for a moment there that Mum wanted to do something or say something, or I don't know, but something weird was going on, but she ended up keeping quiet. So this episode has Prisoner's first successful escape, and I gotta say though, it was all a little bit too easy, wasn't it? I mean, there was no officers or gate guards to stop them, and it was all done in daylight. Maybe they were just lucky on this occasion. I mean, I was reading somewhere that originally Prisoner was only meant to last for 16 episodes, I think, but after a huge success from the fans in the first few episodes, it was eventually extended, and Carol, who played Frankie, didn't want to continue her contract for whatever reason, so I'm guessing that this might be the reason for the sudden escape storyline that was thrown in, because as we all know, this escape will eventually lead up to the departure of Frankie from the show. So maybe there was a slight change in storylines around this sort of episode mark. Lynn and Doug, I'm actually starting to hate this storyline, but they end up staying at one of Doug's old friends, and straight away you can tell by Lynn's face that this was not a good idea. Doug's friends are very different to what Lynn is used to, and the impression that I get from Doug in this episode is that he is no good for Lynn. In my opinion, he is a no-hoper who has no interest in working, and even by the end of this episode, Doug starts to plan another hold-up job with his mate, basically a robbery. Poor Lynn, always getting herself into these ridiculous situations. I mean, you should have just stayed at your parents', and you know how I said in the last episode that Lynn and Doug have this bizarre, rushed marriage proposal? Well, oh god, in this episode, they get married. I think the writers were clearly rushing this storyline just to get Lynn put back into prison. It seems so rushed and silly to me, this part of the episode. I mean, I love Prisoner, but I will happily point out moments that annoy me, and this is definitely one of them. If the makers of Prisoner wanted Lynn back in prison, I'm pretty sure there could have been easier ways. Bea and the girls were playing Matchmaker in this episode when they ended up locking Marilyn and Eddie in the cupboard in the rec room, forcing them both to talk and sort things out, which they do end up doing. Marilyn also decides to tell the police officer Graham the truth about all the drug dealers' names, and as long as it doesn't, get out that it came from her, so that puts an end to that little part of the storyline. But there is actually an interesting scene here where Vera, she almost turns into a little mini Joan Ferguson. When Graham gets quite nasty with Marilyn in one scene, Meg notices that something unethical is going on here and decides to sit in on future meetings. Meg then tells Vera that she will report it to the governor if there is any more victimization, and Vera then turns around and says, "You'll be sorry." Like, what? I don't remember Vera ever being threatening towards Meg. I'm pretty sure this is got to be short-lived, because we are still in the early stages of Prisoner where the characters, they still kind of do little odd things that we're not used to before they're properly established, shall I say. I thought it was quite funny though, considering that later on, in the show, Meg pretty much ends up being Vera's only friend, which is why I think this scene tickled me. I do think Vera is in for some massive disappointment though, because Graham, he keeps blowing her dinner dates off, and we find out that he is actually married with kids. Shock horror. And he's basically using Vera. Once Marilyn has given him what he wants, he basically blows Vera completely off, telling Vera that he will be in touch. But I got a feeling, Vera, he ain't gonna be in touch with you, my lovely darling. This isn't going to help Vera's mood going forward, but it does show just how vulnerable and naive she really is when it comes to men and dating and having no experience, which of course, it all stems back to her mother basically keeping Vera a prisoner in her own home. Those mental scars will always hit deep. Karen seems to be coming back to her old, nicer self. Dr. Miller ends up bringing in some of Karen's old books from when she was a teacher on the outside, which brings back some memories for her, and he basically tells her to, teach the women, not just Frankie, teach all of the girls who need lessons. Is this a sign that Karen is going to stop being the silly girl that she's been the last few episodes? Well, I really, really hope so, because I do actually like Karen Travis's character. So another fun-filled Prisoner episode with lots of drama, a rooftop near miss, and an escape. These episodes are definitely starting to get a lot more action-packed as they go on. So my favourite part in this episode has to be the escape. It was daft and it was silly, but at the same time I flipping loved it. My least favourite moment has to be this ridiculous wedding storyline that's happening with Lynn and Doug. It happened all way too fast, and you can just tell the writers are just speeding up this storyline in order to get her sent back to prison. So that's the end of today's video. Let me know in the comments box below if you enjoyed this episode or not, and let me know what you think of this Lynn and Doug storyline, because I will be really interested to hear. Right then guys, well, thank you all for watching today's video. You're all absolutely amazing as usual. Make sure you enjoy the rest of your weekend, whatever you're up to, and I will see you all again very, very soon.